Order. Question to the Prime Minister. Norman Baker.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
I've been asked to reply. As the House will be aware, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is today at the G8 summit in Japan.
Hague.
Mr. Speaker, given the turbulence in the financial sector, my honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor, proposed last year, and the Chancellor has since agreed, that the amount of people's bank savings protected by the government should rise from £35,000 to £50,000, and also that the system for paying out should be simpler and faster. Can the Leader of the House confirm when the government intends to legislate to give effect to this?
He would have seen that there is in the Queen's Speech programme, the draft legislative programme, a measure to ensure financial stability. And at any time, we are keeping under close review, ensuring that we keep the economy on track. And that is why, although the economic situation is tough, and though it threatens to get tougher, we will see the country through this difficult economic situation.
The Chancellor did say on the 1st of October last year that we will legislate in the forthcoming session to implement, and that is this session, to implement the new regime. And given the approach of an 11-week recess, would it not be prudent and reassuring to expedite this particular aspect of the legislation, specifically concerned with deposit insurance, and pass it into law as soon as possible? Since there is cross-party agreement on the need for this measure, would the government respond positively to an offer of help from the opposition to ensure it passes through Parliament before the summer recess?
Of course, all offers of help from the opposition to get through our legislation are very welcome. And of course, he was in the cabinet under the previous Conservative government, so perhaps he knows a bit about the economy, and perhaps he will remember that when he was in the cabinet,
Right honourable lady. Let the right honourable lady speak. Right honourable lady. Order.
Mr. Speaker, since he is offering our side economic advice, perhaps I can remind him that when he was in the cabinet, was unemployment higher or lower than it is now? It was higher. Were interest rates higher or lower than they are now? And was debt higher or lower than it is now? So I think we'll have help with our legislation from him, but we can manage without his advice.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a great pity that she can't answer on this particular point. If she wants to be Prime Minister, she'd better start acting like one. Will she at least, since she says it is welcome, she says the offer of support from the opposition is welcome, will she at least undertake to consult her colleagues, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister when he comes back from the G8, and come back tomorrow with a full and considered response that takes into account the instability of the financial markets, the length of the recess, the widespread agreement that something needs to be done, and the duty of the government to reassure and protect the public?
Of course I will consult my colleagues, and of course the government will bring forward the necessary legislation. But when it comes to the question of manoeuvring, Mr. Speaker, I want to know why once again he has manoeuvred his honourable friend out of her job of answering the questions. Now, last time I offered her some advice which clearly didn't work. This time my suggestion is that she should give up on the Tory party, go across Lambeth Bridge to Lambeth Palace and apply to become a bishop.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister acknowledge the severity of the crisis in the housing industry, where leading private house builders are going bust, sacking 40% of their workers and dragging down the banks because they've got an excess of unsold private houses? Will the government therefore build up its sensible but pathetically small programme for acquiring property and give genuine freedom to councils and housing associations to acquire property in order to let it out to the 1.7 million people in housing need on waiting lists?
I would agree with the right honourable gentleman. The situation in the housing market is of grave cause for concern, and that is why the government has taken action and will take more. That's why we've ensured that the Bank of England have £50 billion to help with the situation of liquidity. That's why we're building more social homes. That's why we're actually giving £200 million to the Housing Corporation so that they can buy houses which have been built but which haven't been able to be sold. And that's why, too, we're helping first-time buyers by reducing the stamp duty. But I think he would agree with me that the most important thing for housing for the future is that people can stay in their jobs, that unemployment remains high, and that inflation and interest rates remain low. And that's what we'll intend to do.
Yes, I acknowledge that the Housing Corporation proposal is a good one, but it's a drop in the ocean. Can't the government get its priorities right? And instead of the Prime Minister lecturing us on what we should eat for dinner and competing with the leader of the Conservative Party to be the country's Weight Watcher-in-Chief, could the government acknowledge that we've now got a very deep crisis in the British housing market, probably the worst in our lifetime, leading into a serious recession, and it's time the government accepted responsibility for dealing with it?
I would agree that the situation is serious, but I would not agree with him that the situation is like it was in the 1990s. And he should acknowledge that it is important that we keep employment rates high, and it is important that we keep interest rates low. And I think that those who are working hard in the construction industry and in small and big businesses across the country, they don't want the official opposition or any members of the opposition to be at this point talking the economy down. Confidence is important.
Mr. Speaker, since the Prime Minister's main message on the way to the G8 was indeed not to waste food, will the Leader of the House agree that it is important for government departments to set an example on these things as well?
Yes, it is important for government departments to set an example. But I think that the Prime Minister, whoever he's looking to for dietary advice, the last person he'd look to would be somebody who thinks that a good diet is 18 pints a day.
Mr. Speaker, none of that was ever wasted, I can assure him. Isn't it? But isn't it astonishing? Isn't it astonishing, given the Prime Minister's comments, that expenditure at the Treasury, to take one department at random, on hospitality, including food, over the period that the Prime Minister was Chancellor of the Exchequer, more than trebled? And isn't this a spectacular case of preaching one rule to the country and practising another behind the closed doors of government?
No, I'm sure it's absolutely nothing of the sort.
Well, isn't there then, maybe she can agree with this, isn't there something supremely ironic about being lectured about food waste by a Prime Minister who's passed his own sell-by date? And isn't it yet another example of treating people like fools, of preaching prudence but practising profligacy and waste? Isn't this why the whole country is so sick of the Prime Minister? And may I speak for the whole House when I wish her well in her campaign to be rid of him?
The right honourable gentleman shouldn't underestimate the Prime Minister, who is a man of true grit and determination, who will see the country through the difficult circumstances. And I thank him for his kind comments about myself, but I'm afraid it wouldn't be possible because there aren't enough airports in the country for all the men who'd want to flee the country.